Choking, the failure of a person to act or behave as anticipated or expected. This term applies to all forms of sports, and NASCAR is no exception. Sometimes watching a choke can be just as, if not more interesting than a downright week-to-week slugfest. So what are some of the biggest championship chokes in NASCAR history? Today, I'm taking a look at just a few of the biggest ones. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Denny Hamlin has been labeled a choker for well over a decade now, and for good reason. It doesn't matter how many races he wins or times he proclaims that it's his year, every year ends with the same result: depression. And the year that started this narrative would be Hamlin's biggest choke of them all, 2010. With a whopping 8-win season and a slim 33-point lead over four-time defending champion Jimmie Johnson, all Hamlin had to do was put together 2 solid weeks at Phoenix and Homestead to clinch the cup. At Phoenix, Hamlin was doing exactly what he needed to. Although he started 17th, he moved up to lead 190 laps that day, clinching the most laps led bonus, and was well on his way to a top 5 finish. A result that would have given him a comfortable 63-point cushion heading into Homestead. But due to poor fuel mileage, Hamlin would be forced to make an extra stop with 14 laps to go and would ultimately finish 12th, cutting his point lead to just 15. Despite this setback, Hamlin was still in a favorable position heading into one of his better racetracks. But the Homestead weekend proved to be a complete disaster from start to bitter finish. A horrendous qualifying effort would have Hamlin start in the 37th spot. And only 25 laps into the race, his worst fears would come true, as a block from Greg Biffle sent Hamlin spinning into the infield grass. Though his car looked fine, he did sustain minor damage to the front splitter, and the car struggled for the remainder of the race, limping home to a 14th place finish and surrendering the title to Jimmie Johnson in pitiful fashion. After a few down years, Hamlin returned with a vengeance in 2019, winning 6 races on the season and riding a hot streak into the final race at Miami. In the closing stint of the race, it looked like he was the only one within striking distance of his Joe Gibbs teammate Kyle Busch for the championship. With a bold pit call from Chris Gabehart, the 11 car pitted a lap before Busch and took what can only be described as a Texas-sized billboard of duct tape to the front grille. Only a few short laps later, Hamlin's engine inevitably began to overheat, and his championship hopes would be dashed once again due to this costly error. According to Hamlin on his podcast, this grill tape maneuver was planned to give them the speed they needed to track Busch down, but the pit crew member slapped it in the wrong spot, covering entirely too much of the grill. When it was all said and done, Hamlin would come home last of the championship 4 drivers after putting up one of his best seasons to date. Speaking of the playoff era, it's a little harder to consider anything a true choke, since it's pretty well accepted that you can have an amazing season, but if you have 1 or 2 bad races in the playoffs, then it's all for naught. But if there were one exception to this rule, it would have to be Kevin Harvick in 2020. Having by far the best statistical season of his career and one of the greatest overall seasons in the modern era, he looked to be a lock for the championship round at Phoenix. And even despite the random nature of the playoff system, everyone knew how deadly Kevin Harvick was at Phoenix. That dude could win there with one hand tied behind his back. And holding a record for the most playoff points ever with 57 going in, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that this was Harvick's year. But the round of 8 proved to be incredibly unfortunate for Harvick. He dominated Kansas but couldn't pass Logano in the closing laps due to the nature of the 550 horsepower package. He slammed the wall while leading at Texas due to hazardous weather conditions. And at Martinsville, the team unloaded what was probably their worst car of the season, going multiple laps down at one point during the race. And despite a late race rally into the top 10, a poorly executed dump and run on Kyle Busch for the last point would keep Harvick from advancing. After the season's conclusion, he stated that it ultimately didn't matter because the car they had brought to Phoenix wasn't that good anyway, and they weren't able to contend with the championship 4 drivers. But part of me has to think that there's some copium in that statement. I'm willing to bet that the air was just taken out of the 4-team sails at that point, and they definitely didn't put their best foot forward. Regardless, this still stands as one of the biggest chokes in the playoff era. Going back to the earlier years of the chase for the cup though, probably one of the biggest postseason chokes had to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2004. Jr. started the 2004 chase off with a bang, and assumed the championship lead after winning the 3rd race of the chase at Talladega. But in his post-race interview, after being asked about the importance of winning his 5th race at Talladega, Jr. stated,
"Well, it don't mean right now. Daddy's done won here 10 times, so I got to do a little more winning, but we're going to get there."
A uniquely Dale Jr. type of response, but NASCAR wasn't too thrilled with it. See, TV networks in 2004 were particularly uptight about not swearing on broadcast in the wake of the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show controversy. If you know, you know. Mike Helton had warned drivers about swearing in interviews and even penalized drivers Johnny Sauter and Ron Hornaday for doing so. Wait, how on earth did Kurt Busch of all people win this championship? Anyway, after dropping the naughty word on live TV, Jr. was docked 25 points. This may seem absolutely ridiculous now, but hey, at least we can say that they weren't biased in favor of the Golden Boy. 3 weeks later, Dale Jr. found himself 3rd in the standings after Martinsville, trailing Kurt Busch by fittingly enough, those 25 points. The next week in Atlanta, with only 15 laps to go, Junior made an extremely bold move, clearing himself across Carl Edwards' nose for 3rd place, and wrecking himself out in the process. He ended up finishing 33rd that day, losing 106 more points in the process. Combined with his previous penalty from Talladega, Junior had flushed 131 total points down the drain. In the final standings, he lost to Kurt Busch by 138 points. So he would have still come up 7 points shy, but who knows what minor things could have gone differently if those two events didn't occur. It's a lot easier to be bold with your strategy when you're only 7 points behind as opposed to 138. So there could have been a very realistic path to the championship here for Junior. And that's not even mentioning that Junior was also involved in a crash at Martinsville the previous week, which in fairness he couldn't really have avoided, but it still made a massive difference in his championship hopes. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this video, it'd mean a lot to us if you subscribe to the channel and check out dailydownforce.com for more great NASCAR content. We talk about everything from silly season to the latest drama. You can even find merch for all your favorite NASCAR content creators there too. But playoff shenanigans aside, what about a true late season collapse? Well, very few come as close as Bill Elliott in 1992. After putting together a dominant season, things began to fracture apart at the September Dover race, where Elliott was on track to win his 5th race of the year. Crew chief Tim Brewer called for 2 tires to keep Elliott out in front, but team owner Junior Johnson overruled him and demanded a 4-tire change, which would cost Elliott the win, leading to him finishing 2nd place. In the grand scheme of things, this shouldn't have mattered. It was only a mere 5 points that Elliott lost out on. But in the next 5 races, Elliott would blow the remainder of his gargantuan 154-point lead with 4 finishes outside the top 25. The Dover incident had caused an irreparable divide in the race team, and although Elliott won the final race of the year at Atlanta, the damage was already done, and he lost the title to Alan Kulwicki by an incredibly close 10-point margin. Under today's system, this would be only about 2 positions over the course of the entire season. And while 1992 is fondly remembered as one of the greatest championship battles of all time because of it, for Elliott and his fans, it's one of the most agonizing defeats in the history of the sport. But Elliott blew an even bigger lead just a few years prior to this. Some may even call him the Denny Hamlin choke artist of his age. Well, at least he has a championship, but could you imagine if he had 3? Elliott was dominant in the 1985 season, winning 11 of the 28 events and even the Winston Million, earning him the nickname $1 Million Bill. With just 8 races to go in the standings, he had amassed a 206-point lead, which was well over a full race's worth of points that anybody could make up. But the next 8 weeks would prove to be utterly catastrophic for Elliott. Some were outside of his control, like a broken transmission at North Wilkesboro, but some were just downright uncharacteristically bad performances from Elliott's team. Meanwhile, Darrell Waltrip, being the short track ace that he was, continued to rack up good finishes late in the season. After Richmond, Dover, Martinsville, and then Wilkesboro, Waltrip assumed the points lead by 30. A swing of nearly 240 points in only 4 weeks. All the while, old Jaws kept hammering Elliott and his team in the media, talking about how spooked they must be to lose that many points and that Bill just didn't have the grit and experience that he did. DW was sitting exactly where he liked to be the most, up on his high horse. And unlike most people, he wouldn't fall off of it. And adding insult to injury, Elliott would suffer another transmission failure in the final race at Riverside, gift-wrapping the championship to Waltrip by over 100 points. A swing of more than 300 points in only 8 events, with Waltrip proving to the world that it ain't over till it's over. After such an amazing season, Bill Elliott's 1985 championship might just be the biggest missing ring of them all. So that's just a few of NASCAR's biggest championship chokes. Were there any that I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. But don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this one, and check out dailydownforce.com for more NASCAR content.